Why do single farms? Whilst we can enjoy the individuality and comparing and contrasting each one, the ultimate aim is to layer them together to create the most complex single malt whiskey there's ever been. Real provenance is terroir plus traceability and transparency. That's an expensive business.
Ploughing it up and putting in a crop of spring barley, and might put in for 2 years, into oats for a year, back to grass for 2 to 3 years, and then back into barley. It was traditionally in tillage for the last maybe 20 years before I took it over. I took it over and stayed in conventional tillage for a number of years, and then I took the option to jump into organic.
About 200 kilos a hectare of laureate seed. Here's the seed here. They are just starting to come. One there. So, these look very healthy.
Yeah, we got in early. We sowed about 78 acres of corn the last week of February up to the 1st of April. I love farming, I love the land, I love growing crops. So I love putting the seed in the ground and watching it germinate. This is Laureate for Waterford Distillery. I can't wait. The minute I sow a crop, after 8 days, I'm out there, I'm checking, I'm watching to see is it coming up, is it breaking, just to see it coming up.
When we started cutting there one day last week, well, like every farmer, you probably just go walk through it and bite it with your teeth and you'd have a fair idea. You'd be only a couple of % out. So after that, we'd probably try and cut a bit and maybe go and get it tested for moisture. It's the first time anything like this was ever done. Like, I mean, even when this barley leaves here, it goes up to Dalton, but mine 110 or 20 tonne it's separate, it's not mixed with anyone else's.
It should be, and I feel very strongly about this, it should be what it said. It should be Irish barley. Not Irish mixed with a bit of something else, and Irish barley. We have to pay a premium to get good quality malting barley. So that means a very severe selection, entry criteria.
We know that certain fields are better or worse for growing certain different types of crops, but you're now kind of thinking not necessarily just in terms of the crop, but in terms of the end use. Like, we're going to get a different maybe flavour of whiskey out of this field compared to this field. We might get better barley for distilling out of this field than this field. So it kind of, brings it on another level in terms of the end use of it, not just the crop itself. I suppose the first stage of relaxation is when you get it into the shed. It's only actually celebration once the loads are accepted into Dalton's down in Kilkenny. That's when you can relax a little bit.
This machine tells us the protein, the moisture and the bushel weight of the barley in the bucket here. It's the moment of truth for a lot of farmers, so this machine tells them if the protein is good enough.
The reason we use barley, the single malt whiskey, is it's the most flavoursome grain out there. We know there's at least 97 flavour compounds obtained from barley. So what you put in, you might as well start with the best quality possible. So barley is what it's all about. That's where the flavour is.
This store it's purpose built and it's divided into 28 different bays that hold about approximately 120 tonnes of dried barley. Compared to if this was a normal conventional grain store, it would just be one large flat store which would hold considerably more than it does now. So it's a very custom built arrangement. We use each batch depending on how ready it is for malting, because barley must recover from dormancy after drying. So we will sample the store extensively and then we will send the batch that's most suitable as Waterford Distillery need it.
Guinness Brewery, built in 2004, so state-of-the-art, very, very modern brewery. So the first thing was to convert it into a distillery.
We're ready to brew our next farm. Our next farm is Daniel Delaney from Cullow Hill in County Laois. Barley variety is Olympus. So what we have to do here now is we have to do a pre-checks before we go on to them. So we need to check before we introduce the grain. From here then, it goes into the mash filter. So what you have is you have your channels here, so your mash comes down in these channels. So it's very important that these channels are clear, or you won't get an even spread of mash through the filter process. You also need to ensure that the filter sheets themselves aren't blinded, because them filter sheets are what allow the wort to go through the filter. And these are your channels that your mash goes through. Goes into your pre-run tank, and that's where your yeast is added then on the way to the washback. So this is the whole traceability, how important traceability is to us. So what happens is when we scan in the passport, all Martin Foley's information pops up on the screen. So this is telling me it's an Olympus variety grain from 2017, and he gives me his farm number. And it also tells me here the brew numbers for that farm. All that is loaded up onto our track and trace system. When it goes into cask, the information will be there, and hopefully when it gets into a bottle, the information will also be there. Martin's grain was brewed 2 and 3 days ago, all right? Yeast was added, and now it's in the middle of the fermentation process. So this wash then will serve as the charges for spirit and wash still. Okay, so that's Daniel Delaney's wash, 120 hours fermentation, promote lactic fermentation, and also ester formation near the end of it, okay? And that will give us our light, fruity flavours that we're looking for in our end of our new make spirit.
We take a very small middle cut because we want only the finest spirit. We don't want to impinge either side on the lesser quality spirits that big producers are inevitably prone to do.
So while the plant is highly automated, we have temperature probes, pressure transmitters, and everything is captured, and we have historical data. The only thing that's not automated is our handle on the safe. It's manual. So the reason we do this is because we want to control where we do the cuts, and each run might be slightly different, and obviously each farm then is different. Our low wines and feints are made up from our wash run here, and this is our heads and tails from our spirit still are going in here. We're in Ballygarn, which is our purpose-built warehouse for Waterford Distillery. So we're about 12 kilometres from the distillery, and we're about half kilometre from the sea, so we have a marine influence on the casks. It's important that the warehousing we have leaves a lot of air through, so that marine influence will get in. Everything that we do at Waterford Distillery, it's quality. So the people we get the cask from, the American cask, know, and obviously that has a cost implication then. Scotland or Ireland or any of the other distilleries around the world, probably 92 or 3% of casks that the whiskey goes into are American first fill or American bourbon casks. We would be a little bit different in that we fill each farm at a ratio of 50% American first fill, 20% American virgin oak, 15% French premium, so red wines, and 15% Vin du Natural, sweet fortified wines, so sherry, port, Madeira, Masala, Riesling, Sauterne, those type of casks.
Today here we have an unprecedented wood policy. 30% of our cost of production we spend on wood, and I don't think there's anybody that comes close to that sort of expenditure.
We're going to be as natural as possible, so no colour additives, so that means no E150 or caramel, and it's used a lot in, I suppose, Irish whiskey. So the casks that we have here, it's the first time they've been filled after bourbon, but there's nothing to stop a distillery using that 2 or 3 or 4 times. So the colour will lessen and lessen and lessen. We won't be using any caramel E150, so we're depending on the colours from the casks. When the casks get here to Ballygarn, there's a protocol in place. Then James and the guys in the warehouse team will nose a French or VDN cask probably 5 or 6 times before it's filled, just to make sure that it's good. At the moment we have 23,000 casks filled. By having really tight controls over what we take in, we have something like about 300 or 400 casks that we haven't used. Taking the grain from the farmer who spent a lot of time looking after it, and we're doing the same then in the distillery, making sure that it's brewed and distilled the way we want it with quality. We're not going to put it into, to use a word, shit wood. We want to put it into good wood, so we have a very strong wood policy. We pay a lot of money for our casks. You know, in 3 or 4 years' time then, good spirit, good wood, good whiskey.
It's single malt whiskey that has been really well made, technically brilliantly distilled, the best possible quality barley you can get in the world, in the best wood policy in the world, slowly distilled. It's whiskey.